Well, welcome back to the second video of Module 1. We trust that you had some great conversations regarding the first video and some of the concepts that we were looking at. And as you'll recall, we were looking at stability and instability, and we really made the case that what ministry needs to do is reorient itself toward the spaces of instability that are actually more frequent with young people than perhaps we have assumed in the past. And so if we can focus on that, perhaps we can find out where young people need the church, need us the most, in ways that we can help and serve them better. And so what we want to do then is, you'll remember from last time, we talked about this idea of starting with young people and listening for empathy. But as you can imagine, probably from the interviews that you did, that the expanse of topics and ways to think about all the ways that you are listening to young people can be a bit overwhelming. Is there any way that we can categorize our listening or sharpen our listening so that we might be more helpful toward understanding our young people and then serving them as well? And that made us really think about using these lenses of identity, belonging, and purpose, or what we like to call IBP for short. What IBP does is it allows us to try to categorize some of the ways that young people are expressing their experiences that oftentimes are in the realm of instability. Perhaps through these lenses, we can define a little bit better about what their true needs are and what's really going on in their lives so that we can serve them. And so if we think about this idea of identity, belonging, and purpose, one of the ways that we can look at it is through thinking about each of them in specific ways. Now, identity ultimately is rooted in a question of who am I? This is a deep and profound question that is not only asked by young people, but is asked by people. We are all constantly navigating this question. And so we can also look at this in a more profound definition, and you'll see this in your handout, that this is a set of beliefs concerning those who are in relationship with one's personal attributes, relationships, and group affiliations. All these have an effect on discovering, helping young people discover who they are. And so identity plays a crucial role in the ways that we think about the way the world works. There's also belonging, which is really rooted in a question that we say is, well, where do I belong? And maybe a more specific definition might be this: the sense that one is connected to and can trust a community in which one can exert influence, have one's needs met, and mutually share emotional connection with others. So this is the place where I belong. It's the community that I feel a part of, where I am receiving and where I am giving. And my presence in the community is actually validated and significant. And then with purpose, the question that we ask is, well, what difference do I make? And again, a more formal definition might be this: a commitment to a meaningful goal that leads to behavior that works toward this goal. Now, what's interesting about this is that we might say, well, why is this so unique to young people? If these are people questions, maybe we just need to forget about young people and just think about the whole church and sort of ask these questions. Part of me would say, yes, we should be addressing these questions for every kind of person, no matter what their age. But I think what we find unique about adolescents and young adults is that this is probably the most challenging time in their lives. It's the place where they are really constructing their identity, belonging, and purpose. And it has the potential, as it's constructed, to really be the ways that their lives will spin off in a particular trajectory. On top of that, because of what we know developmentally, I think that young people experience these quests for identity, belonging, and purpose in much more profound ways. My life's not scripted yet. There are still opportunities. As a matter of fact, there's so many possibilities that sometimes it's overwhelming to me. I'm getting conflicting messages about who I'm supposed to be or where I'm supposed to belong or what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I have to eventually make choices for myself. And these are the deep and profound questions that young people are really navigating in their lives. And so we feel like these are really profound questions that if we can begin to use them as lenses, perhaps we can understand some of the challenges and opportunities that they're wrestling with as they go through these periods of lived life and experience that are often experienced as instability. Now, another way for us to think about it might be like this. What if IBP helps us to discern and give language to the categories of some of the listening that we've done? We can maybe start seeing themes in our own young people that we're serving that become more specific. And so IBP does a lot of things, though. I think what it does is it gives us lenses for us to be a little more generous with grace. Instead of just assuming that young people's actions are all good or all bad or all helpful or not, perhaps we can see that what's actually going on here is that they're on a quest to discover more about who they are and where they belong and what difference they make in their lives. And what governs this oftentimes is the narrative that they think that they're leading. You can't see this on the screen because you have to look at my face, but that last title up there is narrative. And if we think about it this way, maybe we can discover that sometimes the actions of our young people are not out of rebellion or even out of holiness, but instead it's them trying to live right in the middle of the narrative that they really believe in the world. So if my narrative is that the world is competitive, it's very easy for me to say, well, my identity, I'm a competitor. My job's to get ahead of everybody else. Belonging, oftentimes maybe I might believe I succeed to be accepted by those who value me by what I accomplish, right? Acceptance, belonging is associated with accomplishment or purpose. My purpose is to win, and I must keep on winning if I want to actually make a difference in the world. Maybe you know some people like that, whether they're young or old. This is the narrative in which they're living. Now let's just try another one. Well, what if the world is dangerous? And again, this isn't always perception. Unfortunately, I think that we know young people that have been in really traumatic situations that have affected their identity, belonging, and purpose. If the world, the narrative of which they are living is dangerous, then they say, well, I'm a survivor, and my job is to survive in a world that is out to get me. My belonging, I seek to find a place that's safe from a world that is dangerous. My purpose is to avoid it, all risk for self-preservation, right? Now, maybe we know people like this as well. And again, we don't necessarily judge their actions. Instead, we're saying, well, if this is the narrative by which they are living their lives, and this is the way what defines their identity, belonging, and purpose, you can see that they're living exactly in the middle of the narrative that they have spun about how they think the world works. Now, again, this is really broad, but another way to think about it is what if the narrative was that the world is hopeful? What if my identity was this, is that I'm made in the image of God? What if my belonging was I seek a community where I can receive and I can give? What if my purpose is to live the best version of me to make the world a better place? We probably know people like this as well, where because of the gospel, because of the hope that we have as Christians, that this narrative begins to shift and form our sense of identity, belonging, and purpose. Now, what's beautiful about this is that if we hold it in this way, we can be generous and more gracious toward people. Rather than judging their actions, we can begin to interpret what's maybe informing those actions, what's causing them to act or believe or perceive the way the world works and the way they perceive themselves and others in God, and etc. And so I think what this does is it gives us a chance to understand people, to really begin to be open to what they have experienced, how they see the world, and how it has an effect on them. And so their quest for IBP, I believe, is real. It's authentic. It's honest. And even could be challenging. And I think the underlying question that we have as those who care about young people is this: who will quest with them? Who's willing to come alongside and acknowledge the narrative that they are living, and also at the same time provide an alternative narrative, a better story, a more hopeful story that allows them to have a better sense and a more beautiful sense of who they are and where they belong and what difference that they can make. So I want you just to think about that for a second. Reflect on the conversations that you had with young people, and you've done that earlier. What narrative do you think the different people that you talked with are living? Can you get a sense of it? How do they talk about their identity? How do they talk about their belonging? How do they talk about their purpose? Do you notice any patterns where the real stick point is with identity or belonging or purpose? Or there is this narrative that they all seem to hold that seems to bring them down or get them into trouble or keeps them from seeing who they really are? What is good news for them, and how do we begin to understand that? And so we have an opportunity here to start with young people, to listen for empathy, and then begin to use these lenses of identity, belonging, and purpose to truly understand where they're coming from, the narratives that they think they're living in, and what really is good news to them, and how they are seeking to quest after their identity, belonging, and purpose. So now you have a chance, again, to stop and reflect. And again, what you can do is you can read and discuss together Module 1B. It's the second page of this section. And we've got some questions there for you. And again, I want to ask you to refer to your listening exercise. Where do you see young people asking for clarity in their quests for identity, belonging, and purpose? You have some new lenses now to think about that, and hopefully that'll help you appreciate where they're coming from more, to understand their experiences so that we can serve them better. So have some great conversations. Thanks for listening to this second video and for working through this first module. And until we see you again, God's grace and peace.